After last week's arguments at the Supreme Court, many experts believe that there could be a majority, a 5-member majority, to strike down the individual mandate. And if that were to happen, if it were to be ruled unconstitutional, how would you still guarantee health care to the uninsured and those Americans who become insured as a result of the law? And then a question for President Calderon and Prime Minister Harper. Over the weekend, Governor Mitt Romney said that the U.S. used to promote free enterprise around the world. And he said, quote, "Our president doesn't have the same feelings about American exceptionalism that we do." And I think over the last 3 or 4 years, some people around the world have begun to question that. So my question to the both of you is whether you think that American influence has declined over the last 3 to 4 years. And President Obama, if you'd like to respond to that, too.
Well, on the second part of your question, it's still primary season for the Republican Party. They're going to make a decision about who their candidate will be. It's worth noting that I first arrived on the national stage with a speech at the Democratic Convention that was entirely about American exceptionalism, and that my entire career has been a testimony to American exceptionalism. But I will cut folks some slack for now because they're still trying to get their nomination. With respect to health care, I'm actually continue to be confident that the Supreme Court will uphold the law. And the reason is because in accordance with precedent out there, it's constitutional. That's not just my opinion, by the way. That's the opinion of legal experts across the ideological spectrum, including 2 very conservative appellate court justices that said this wasn't even a close case. I think it's important, because I watched some of the commentary last week, to remind people that this is not an abstract argument. People's lives are affected by the lack of availability of health care, the inaffordability of health care, their inability to get health care because of pre-existing conditions. The law that's already in place has already given 2.5 million young people health care that wouldn't otherwise have it. There are tens of thousands of adults with pre-existing conditions who have health care right now because of this law. Parents don't have to worry about their children not being able to get health care because they can't be prevented from getting health care as a consequence of a pre-existing condition. That's part of this law. Millions of seniors are paying less for prescription drugs because of this law. Americans all across the country have greater rights and protections with respect to their insurance companies and are getting preventive care because of this law. So that's just the part that's already been implemented. That doesn't even speak to the 30 million people who stand to gain coverage once it's fully implemented in 2014. And I think it's important. I think the American people understand, and I think the justices should understand that in the absence of an individual mandate, you cannot have a mechanism to ensure that people with pre-existing conditions can actually get health care. So there's not only an economic element to this and a legal element to this, but there's a human element to this. And I hope that's not forgotten in this political debate. Ultimately, I'm confident that the Supreme Court will not take what would be an unprecedented, extraordinary step of overturning a law that was passed by a strong majority of a democratically elected Congress. And I just remind conservative commentators that for years what we've heard is the biggest problem on the bench was judicial activism or a lack of judicial restraint, that an unelected group of people would somehow overturn a duly constituted and passed law. Well, is a good example, and I'm pretty confident that this court will recognize that and not take that step. I'm sorry. As I said, we are confident that this will be that this will be upheld. I'm confident that this will be upheld because it should be upheld. And again, that's not just my opinion. That's the opinion of a whole lot of constitutional law professors and academics and judges and lawyers who've examined this law, even if they're not particularly sympathetic to this particular piece of legislation or my presidency.
Your question was a little local for me, and so I'm glad that the President of the United States answered it. But I would take advantage of this moment to say that after increasing the budget line for the folk insurance sixfold, and after having built more than 1,000 new clinics in the country, we're getting close to reaching universal coverage of health care. Full, free health care coverage for all people up to 18 years of age, including cancer coverage. Of the 12 million Mexicans, 106 million will have efficient, effective, universal health care coverage. So I would say that I would hope that one of the greatest economies in the world, such as the United States, could follow our example in achieving this, because it was a great thing.
Well, I don't think you really expect me to intervene in the U.S. presidential election. Let me just say this, for Canada, and this is something that I think transcends governments in Canada or administrations here in the United States. For Canada, the United States is and always will be our closest neighbor, our greatest ally, and our best friend. And I believe that American leadership is at all times great and indispensable for the world. And I think over the past few years, we've done great things together in terms of the response, both through the G20 and bilaterally on the recession and the recovery. We had, under your leadership, Barack, that successful intervention in Libya. Our trade relationship is the biggest in the world and growing, and so I think it's been a tremendous partnership.